Let me die here." Her voice was thin, broken, more like the rattle of dry wind than a cry, but it stopped him cold. Eli Crawford had seen many things in his 56 years: dead cattle scattered across the desert, miners shot down in fights over whiskey, even men who hanged themselves from their own barn beams. But he had never heard a woman ask for death like it was the only kindness left. She lay in the dirt beside a dry stone well, the kind that had not seen water in a decade. Her white dress was torn to rags, her skin bruised black and purple, her hair matted with blood and dust. The desert had a way of chewing people up, but this one was still breathing. Her chest rose slow, shaky, like every breath was a bargain she did not want to make. Eli climbed down from his horse. His boots crunched on the rocks as he stepped closer. He knelt, touched her shoulder. She stirred but did not fight. Her eyes opened just a crack. Eyes hollowed out by pain. Eyes that had stopped hoping long before he ever rode by. He pulled back the fabric at her hip to see the wound, and that was when his blood turned cold. There it was, a mark no rancher in Arizona could mistake. A brand from the J.Z. gang, half burned away, but still clear enough to chill a man's bones. He froze. That brand meant stolen cattle, burned towns, and bodies left in canyons. Men who wore it had spilled blood without a second thought. And now, here it was, seared into the body of a woman lying at his feet. So here's the question. What kind of woman carries that mark? And why had her own gang left her broken beside a well in the middle of nowhere? Eli looked down at her again. She was lighter than a sack of grain, bones under skin, more dead than alive. He could leave her. Many men would have, but he did not. He lifted her onto his horse, climbed up, and turned toward his ranch. Whatever trouble she carried, it was not ending at that well. When Ruth woke, it was not under the open sky. She was staring up at a roof made of rough timber, patched with scraps of canvas that let in strips of light. The smell was strong, horses and dust and smoke. She tried to move, and pain shot through her ribs. A bowl of corn mash sat beside her, the kind of food poor ranchers lived on, not the sort of meal anyone would waste on a stranger. She touched it, half afraid it would disappear, then pulled her hand back like a child, not sure if she deserved it. Eli was outside. She could hear the scrape of boots on the porch, the creak of a chair. He did not rush in. He did not sit at her side like some storybook savior. He kept his distance. That was his way. When he finally spoke, his voice carried through the door. Not a question, just a fact. Eat. You need it. She obeyed. She ate in silence, and when the food was gone, she whispered the story she'd prepared. She said she had been taken by a band of outlaws, beaten, and left for dead when she refused to follow their orders. It sounded believable enough. Her bruises told half the story for her. Her voice filled in the rest. Most men would have nodded and accepted it. Eli did not. He leaned in the doorway, arms folded, eyes steady. He did not press her. But the weight of his silence told her he was not sold on every word. The truth, of course, was something she could never admit. She had been one of them, a member of the J.Z. gang. She had ridden with them, stolen with them, even dreamed of running off with more than her share. When they caught her trying to take gold that was not hers, they beat her until she begged for death. In the chaos, she slipped free. That well was the only reason she lived long enough for Eli to find her. She hid all of that now. She smiled weakly, lowered her eyes, let the rancher see only the broken parts, never the guilty ones. It was a gamble, and she knew it. But in that quiet room, with the shadow of a hard man watching, it was the only chance she had. And here's where you have to wonder. If a woman carries scars, that deep scars that tie her to a name every man fears, how long can she hide the truth before it comes back to claim her? The town of Prescott was never quiet. Wagons rattled, dogs barked, men called out prices for hides and corn. Eli brought Ruth along because he needed supplies, not because he wanted her seen. She kept her head low, hair pulled forward to hide the bruises, moving like a shadow behind him. For a while it worked. Folks glanced, but nobody stared too long. Then came the voice, sharp, bitter, carrying across the market like a whip crack. I know that face. Ruth froze before she turned. A man with a scar running from his ear to his jaw was pushing through the crowd. Caleb Sutter, one of the J.Et. gangs who had somehow crawled out alive. He grabbed Ruth by the arm, spun her around, and shouted for everyone to hear. This woman rode with us. She bled men for gold and left her own kind to die. She's no victim. She's poison. The crowd went still, eyes narrowed. Some folks backed away as if she carried disease. Ruth's lips trembled, but no words came out. She looked like a deer caught in torchlight, her chest rising too fast, her eyes begging for a hole to crawl into. Eli stepped forward. His hand hovered near his belt, but never touched the gun. He locked eyes with Caleb, voice low but clear enough for the whole street. Maybe she did wrong. Maybe she carries a past darker than most. But not here. Not now. She's under my roof. And that means you go through me first. The silence stretched. Caleb sneered, spit in the dirt, and backed off, muttering curses. The crowd slowly broke apart, some shaking their heads, others whispering. Ruth stood there shaking, her arms still red from his grip. On the ride back, she said nothing. Eli didn't press her, but the air between them was heavy. He had stood up for her, not because he believed every word she'd told him, but because a man like him couldn't let another man drag her down in the street. Out here, reputation meant everything, and she had just lost what little she had left. Now here's the part that should make you lean closer. What happens when a woman is stripped of all excuses, when her lies start cracking wide open, and the only person left standing beside her is a rancher with doubts of his own? That's where the real fire begins. And if you've been pulled into this story the way I think you have, this is the perfect time to stay with us, subscribe, and keep riding along, because the next turn in this trail is one you will not want to miss. That night, the ranch was quiet. Too quiet. Ruth lay awake staring at the roof beams, her chest tight. She could still hear Caleb's voice in the market, still feel the crowd's eyes burning holes in her back. She could not shake the truth. Eli had stood up for her, but only for that moment. He had not said he believed her, and she knew deep down he never would. Before dawn, she slipped outside. The air was cool and sharp. She saddled one of Eli's horses, her hands trembling as she pulled the cinch tight. She looked back at the house, at the lightless windows, at the chair on the porch where Eli usually sat. Then she swung up and rode off without a sound. When Eli woke, the stall was empty. He sat on the porch for a long while. The old photo of Mary in his hand, he whispered to the desert, not to anyone in particular. Folks run when the truth catches up. Some come back. Most don't. Then he set the picture down and waited. 2 days later, Eli rode into Dead Man's Wash hunting strays. That is where Caleb found him. The outlaw stepped out from the rocks, rifle in hand, grin stretched across his scarred face. This time there was no crowd to keep him in check. He wanted blood, and Eli was alone. The fight was quick and brutal. Caleb's shot tore across Eli's arm, spinning him into the dirt. Dust filled his lungs as he struggled to lift his revolver. He knew he was seconds from the end. Caleb's shadow loomed larger, the barrel of his gun lowering slow, savoring the moment. Then came the thunder of hooves. Ruth burst into the wash, hair wild, eyes set with something harder than fear. She rode straight into the fray, her horse kicking up a storm of dust. Caleb turned too late. The fight turned. Shots cracked. Echoes rolled across the canyon. When the dust cleared, Caleb was sprawled in the gravel and Eli was still breathing. Ruth slid down, knelt beside Eli, her hands shaking as she pressed against his wound. Tears ran with the dust on her face, and with a voice that barely carried, she said what she had hidden for too long. I was one of them. I betrayed them. They beat me half dead and left me there. I thought I could lie my way out of it, but I cannot lie to you anymore. That night in the wash, with blood in the dirt and the canyon echoing silent, Ruth stopped running, whatever she had been. Whatever she had done. The choice she made to come back had already changed the trail she was on. Eli made it back to the ranch with Ruth at his side. His arm was bound, his steps slower than before, but he carried himself with the same quiet strength that had always marked him. Ruth moved through the small house like someone who had finally chosen a place to stop. She swept the porch, cooked simple meals, fetched water from the creek. No one told her to. She simply did it. One morning, she stepped outside and found something new. Beside Eli's old chair on the porch sat another one, rough wood but sturdy. He never said a word about it. He just sat in his usual spot and looked out over the land. Ruth hesitated, then lowered herself into the new chair. It was not forgiveness spoken out loud, but it was something better. It was acceptance. Life did not turn perfect after that. Scars do not vanish, and the desert has its way of reminding you how fragile people are. But the days grew steady. Ruth worked the soil. Eli taught her to guide the horses. The house that once felt hollow began to feel lived in again. Two broken lives slowly knitting into something new. And maybe that is the lesson here. A person's past does not always vanish, but it also does not have to chain them forever. Ruth carried guilt like a brand burned into her skin, yet in the end, it was her choice to come back, to stay. That gave her a different future. Eli could have judged her, could have let her die by that well. Instead, he gave her space to prove who she wanted to be. So think about it. How many people have you known who ran from their mistakes, and how many had the courage to turn back and face them? And if life handed you the chance to give someone that space, would you take it? If this story has held you to the end, do me one favor, tap the like button, subscribe, and ride along with us for the next tale, because there are more stories out here in the dust and sun of the Old West, stories that will stay with you long after the screen goes dark.